It's Monday, March 30th. We are in week 2 of quarantine. The president has an update for how long these measures should be continued. I'll share that with you. Plus, the arrival of a U.S. Navy ship here in New York City, preparing for the deluge of cases to come in the weeks ahead. And how does China factor into all of this? Plus, the politics around the coronavirus fight coming up on the Buck Sexton Show.
Yeah, I don't want high approval ratings for this. I wish we could have our old life back. We had the greatest economy that we've ever had, and we didn't have death. We didn't have this. We didn't have this horrible scourge, this plague. You call it whatever you want, the virus. But we're working very hard. That's all I know. And, I see things. I see numbers. They don't matter to me. What matters to me is that we have a victory over this thing as soon as possible. When you hear that 2.2 million people could have died if we didn't go through all of this, and now the number will be, a much lower number. Hopefully it's going to be the numbers that we're talking about. But so I appreciate it very much. But, what I want is I want our life back again. I want our country back. I want the world back. I want the world to get rid of this. This, again, 151 countries. And we're going to do it. We're going to have a great victory.
Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. From here in New York City to you all across the country and around the world, the president giving voice to exactly what so many of us are thinking right now. We want our lives back. We want our country back. We want our world back. And this virus has now shown people that it is much more than was anticipated a couple of months ago. The response to it is going to be a point of difficulty and pain for a lot of people. And what the economic ramifications of this may be, nobody can tell you yet. But we now are in it. We are in this fight that really the last few weeks it felt like preparation for. Here we are now trying to establish all the supplies we need, the protocols, and the best possible practices for defeating a pandemic that it's still stunning that we're at this point right now. And it's also a reminder of really how petty and how unserious so many of the political squabbles of the past have been. Here we are desperately trying to come together to create enough masks and ventilators, get all this personal protective equipment in place. Here we are doing everything in our power to try and find a way forward that saves the maximum amount of lives while also trying to maintain some economic activity going forward, or at least the ability to have an economy, because lives also are quite clearly dependent upon that. Anyone who doesn't think so should stop and ask, well, hold on a second. If a shortage of ventilators is going to cause death, where do the ventilators come from? We need economic activity in this country, and the president certainly understands that. But I must say, yesterday at his press conference, it was quite clear that there has been a change in thinking from this administration to straight up lockdown. That's where we are. We are in the national batten down the hatches phase of this fight. The president had to tell everybody that remember, I had been telling you that 15 days to stop the spread. That was the initial campaign. And then we should give them the 15 days. Well, we've done that. We've gotten to week 2 of that. And instead of thinking that we're anywhere near being finished, what we have been told is the following. This was the president yesterday. Bruce and Mark, play clip 4.
The modeling estimates that the peak in death rate is likely to hit in 2 weeks. So I'll say it again. The peak, the highest point of death rates, remember this, is likely to hit in 2 weeks. Nothing would be worse than declaring victory before the victory is won. That would be the greatest loss of all. Therefore, the next 2 weeks and during this period, it's very important that everyone strongly follow the guidelines, have to follow the guidelines that our great vice president holds up a lot. He's holding that up a lot. He believes in it so strongly. The better you do, the faster this whole nightmare will end. Therefore, we will be extending our guidelines to April 30th to slow the spread.
We are on quarantine here in New York City and in other cities as well. We are in putting in place maximum protective measures for another 30 days, effectively. That's where we're going to be. It's not going to be May before you even have some restoration of normal economic activity. It's going to be quite a while before we see ourselves able to start to breathe more easily, pardon the expression. This was a tough one. Now, the market didn't really react very negatively to this today, I think in part because the expectation is that the $2 trillion rescue package is going to be able to sustain the economy with all of the direct cash infusions as well as the loans for small businesses, that it'll sustain the economy for at least 3 or 4 months, more or less. We'll see if that's correct. Remember that no one's ever done this before. There is no playbook for putting an economy in a deep freeze. There's no precedent for a society as large as ours, with the complexity that ours has, of telling people that they have to stay at home. And in New York, it's getting particularly extreme. I'll bring you into, look, I understand this is a show that many of you all across the country hear, but New York is the worst hit place in the entire country right now with this. And what you're seeing here is going to be replicated elsewhere. The spread of the disease, the fight. Now, perhaps the aggregate numbers here will be larger, but keep in mind that the hospital system here is also larger and more complicated than what you would have, more complex than what you would have in a vast majority, probably all other metro areas in the country, just because of the size of New York City itself. So the president said, look, give us until the end of April. Give us until the end of April to get this thing as under control as we can, and then we'll look to start to have more normal economic activity. I guess now we are really in the government's hands here in a way that makes me deeply uncomfortable. I'm sure many of you feel exactly the same way. I have two conflicting emotions about the government response. On the one hand, I want to be optimistic and I want to be cheerful about their prospects for long-term success. I mean, there's nothing, you can't be cheerful now. It's bleak out there, my friends. But be optimistic, better word, about the long-term possibilities here. And I'm hoping for the best from our government response. I'm also seeing a combination of incompetence and dictatorial impulse from the people that are in charge, specifically the mayor in New York City, but you'll see this elsewhere too. This is going to be a stress test on our society and on us, the likes of which we have never seen before. This disease at this point, based on what I'm hearing, and I've spoken to numerous doctors who are dealing with this problem themselves, and what they're telling me is I thought it was going to be bad. Really, the last 3 weeks, I've realized that this is going to be, we're in for a real nightmare here. The disease itself is worse than I had anticipated. I mean, I'm not a healthcare expert. All I can do is read what I read what I see. Everyone reads what they read. But I am seeing now that this is even a level beyond. And there are younger, healthier people in their 40s and 50s who are needing to go in for emergency care and get intubated on this. So, look, you don't come here so that I can tell you, oh my gosh, the sky's falling, and it's not. We're going to be all right, as I've been saying. We'll get through this as a country. We certainly have better days ahead. And I think that while we're preparing for this and trying to look at all the most up-to-date information we can, it's worth remembering that there will be a renewed sense, and perhaps for you, it might even start today, an appreciation for the lives that we have been able to lead in this country up to this point, and a renewed appreciation down the line once we can return to some degree of normalcy for really what we have. I spent much of my time, the first 3 years of the Trump presidency, on air. Not a lot of the time, but I repeatedly said to you all, don't listen to the people in the media that are talking about all this. Enjoy your life. You know this. You've listened to the show. I've said, enjoy where we are. Unbelievable prosperity, relative peace, no major terrorist attacks looming over our heads, no economic catastrophe. All those things were true until year 4. And as we enter year 4 of the Trump presidency, he got hit. And this is the toughest thing that any American president has been hit with since Pearl Harbor, honestly. This is the most, and some of you would say, well, in some ways, maybe even the Great Depression was a bigger challenge than Pearl Harbor itself. We're going to win. But I'm just saying, you have to go back. This is a 100-year challenge we're facing right now. Once every 100 years, a society like ours faces something like this. Now, I do take a positive long-term view. I will continue to do that. We have a lot to get through here today. I've talked to doctors about the prospects for these different drugs. The Gilead antiviral drug, the drug that's actually used to treat gout. It's been around for a very long time, an old drug up in Montreal. There's also chloroquine and azithromycin. There's serology tests to look at your blood and see if you have antibodies. There's a lot of new weapons, just like in any war. I mean, those of you who are history buffs know if you go back to the First World War, the Second World War, the speed of munition development during a war is like nothing else because there's a really obvious and immediate need for better weapons. We are going to see that, I believe, with this disease. We are going to see a weaponization of the medical community's knowledge against this virus at an unprecedented pace. And it's necessary because this virus is even more contagious and nasty and dangerous than a vast majority of the people who are following it anticipated. This thing is this is bad. It's so bad that you start to wonder, this really just occurred naturally in nature. This wasn't anything that any human beings anywhere around the world perhaps had any hand in messing with. Again, I don't know, but it's a question. We have to leave open the possibility until we really know what happened here. I feel like we have to leave open a lot of possibilities. We've been lied to a lot. We're being lied to right now by the Chinese government every day. They're saying they have no new cases. We'll get to that. But on the upside here, as I've been saying, you will appreciate your life more than you ever have when we are through this, I think. That's my belief. I certainly will. I'll appreciate little things about life. And there's also a closeness now that you feel with the people that you love. There's a recognition. We've always been on borrowed time. Now we know we're on borrowed time. Now we've been reminded in this era where we're all trying to extend youth, into the end of a century of our own lifespan, right? We're all think we're going to live forever and ever and be healthy forever and ever. And, that lessens a little bit as you get older. But now, these people that in their 20s and their 30s thinking about mortality, thinking about societal collapse, that just never really enters your mind. It doesn't really come up. And we see that all societies have dealt with this, stretching back for all of human history. Pestilence, plague, this has been around for as long as we've been gathering, since we came out of the caves and came together and started farming and having something that we would call now a society. So this is not new in that sense at all, but this particular virus reminds us that we can all walk around with supercomputers in our pockets that we call smartphones, with instantaneous computation, with technology, with communications that seem like they're from an alien race compared to what we would have had even 40 or 50 years ago. And yet someone somewhere becoming infected with something you can't even see has brought modern society to this point where we are in a real fight. We're in a fight the likes of which we've never seen before. As I said to you, this is a once in 100 years challenge, and it really does take us back. There's nothing like this that we have faced in one concentrated dose. Yes, the Cold War, nuclear weapons, staring at each other across the line of mutually assured destruction and all that. But that was long and drawn out, and there was always in the back of our minds some sense that you can deal with human beings. Human beings you can understand, even if they don't have remorse, if they don't have any sense of decency, which is usually not the case. They all have weak points, right? The immortal words of Schwarzenegger in Predator. If it bleeds, we can kill it. Viruses don't bleed. We do. And so we are at a disadvantage in that respect. And we are mobilizing our society against something that has the ability, unfortunately, to hit us now and come back and hit us again in the future. This will change us forever. I'll be thinking more in the weeks ahead as we do this show. And this show really has become a lifeline for my sense of connection and quite honestly, a continued stability and sanity in the midst of being in quarantine in New York City. But this will also change us. This whole process we're going through, we're seeing right now of dealing with this virus will change society in ways that nobody can really anticipate. The part of it that I think on an individual level, there'll be a lot of lessons learned from this that you can view as growth, as positive, assuming we get through this without horrific levels of casualties. We're going to have a lot of loss of life, which is terrible and deeply regrettable in every sense. But there'll be individuals, I think, who come out of this with a different view of what really matters. The part of me that is most concerned is for the structures we have in place. In terms of long-term threat, we will beat this virus. Maybe we'll beat it in 18 months, but we will beat it. But what does the government look like? What does our economy look like? What does America and the world look like in 18 months? I can't begin to tell you that I know the answer, but I'm going to be sharing thoughts with you as we go ahead here.
We're all in this together, all of us. I have never seen anything like it. The unity, the esprit de corps, the spirit, I've never seen anything like it. It's a beautiful thing to watch. Unfortunately, the enemy is death. It's death. A lot of people are dying, so it's very unpleasant. It's a very unpleasant thing to go through. But the level of competence, the level of caring, the level of love, I just think it's brilliant. And it's possibly happening in other countries. Possibly, I don't know. I can't speak to other countries, but I can speak to the United States of America. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I am very proud to be your president.
He knows how serious this is. For anybody who was doubtful before, and I understand there's certainly a lack of trust, and there should be a lack of trust in our national news media. When this is all through and done with, I hope people realize that these media brands that pretend to be objective journalists, it's not just a function of I don't like them because of their politics and their dishonesty. It's that they have done a massive disservice by lighting their credibility on fire. We needed a media going into this that we could trust. We needed a media where they came on TV and they said to the American people, hey, forget about Trump for a second. This is real. Here's the information I want to give you on this. Some people did this. I'm not saying whenever I talk about the media, there's obviously exceptions. There are some individuals, some network that were more willing to just bring the American people facts and information. But by and large, our media let us down at a point of absolute crisis where information was the difference between life and death. They'd rather play games and throw food at Donald Trump.
Why don't you act in a little more positive? It's always trying to
My question to you
get you. And you know what? That's why nobody trusts the media anymore.
My
That's
question
why
to you is,
people,
how is that going to impact?
Excuse me, you didn't hear me. That's why you used to work for the Times and now you work for somebody else. Look, let me tell you something. Be nice. Don't
Mr.
be
President,
threatening.
my question
Don't
is...
be threatening. Be nice.
This was what the press reported on more than anything else. While the President of the United States yesterday is telling us that we all basically have to be on lockdown for 30 days, that we have to be on lockdown, that people cannot go and do their jobs, cannot go about their lives for another month. We are losing a half a quarter, built in now, a half a quarter of economic activity and GDP. Now, I know when we start talking about these things, you start talking about what the economic impact of this will be long term. You have a lot of individuals who say you're throwing granny off the cliff, you're killing old people, you're so heartless. No, I want us to be in the best position possible as a country to save the maximum number of lives and have the maximum number of decent conditions for life in this country. The amount of the loss of life that could start to happen if we have real decay, forget about decay, that's too slow, collapse of civil society and what happens in the streets. I mean, I can tell you this, and I'm going to be coming in and out on what I'm seeing here in New York. You know, there's some positives and there's some real downsides. But first, let me go back before I give you my New York centric view of this. I mean, I can see a lot of Midtown. I can basically see Times Square from my window. Now, a lot of you have a pretty good sense of where I am in the city, but you know, I'm close enough to the very heart of things that I have a particular, a true perspective and view on exactly what's going on in the busiest part of the whole city. But I'll get back to that. First, let me just say that this exchange you had with Yamiche, I'm not trying to be funny. I actually forget how to pronounce her name. I think it's Yamiche. So she's a journalist, and her name was trending on Twitter. It's Yamiche. So I'm not trying to, again, I'm not making jokes here. I just don't know how to pronounce her name. But she got into this exchange with the president, and you had all these people who were saying, journalists out there, who, while I'm sitting here wondering, and I talked to a doctor this morning, I'm talking to doctor friends of mine as often as I can to get as much information as I can, because this isn't my area. I mean, after 9/11, I went off the CIA. And really, our main national security threat, our effort, was against radical Islamic terrorism around the world. We had 2 wars with this, and this became an area that I knew. I had expertise. I knew how much we had to worry about different terrorist groups, and I had an understanding that other people didn't. And I also knew what information the U.S. and I was a worker bee, but I knew what information the top people in the U.S. government were making their determinations off of, because I was seeing it too. With coronavirus, this is not an area where I can tell you anything other than I'm just researching and learning as fast as I can, as furiously as I can every single day. And I'm trying to bring you the most valuable information with some context that I can, and also making my best efforts to be. Look, I'm never going to be not political. It's just not who I am when it comes to the way I view things. I'm honest with you about my sense of reality and life and politics and everything else. But I'm trying to make this really about defeating the virus as much as I can, and less about the nasty and often pointless back and forth with the left and the right. But the way that journalists who have the opportunity to go directly to the source and ask the president during these press conferences, the way that they go after him day after day, what do they really think they are doing here that is worthwhile? And how can they be so petty and so immature and irresponsible that they think that this is a good way to spend their time? This Yamiche talking to the president, yesterday, I stand with Yamiche, or there was some kind of a hashtag about how, as if this is an important thing that was going on. Look, I think the president, should he, lose his temper with journalists? I mean, and under other circumstances, probably not. Because I didn't really think the president is able to get a moment's peace right now. Does anyone think that he's a human being who also is tired, who's worried about family members, who's worried about his own health? The Prime Minister of the UK has COVID-19. Now, we haven't yet seen any evidence that no matter, you could probably have the best medical care in the world right now, and there's no evidence to prove that if your immune system, because of age or other reasons, is not up for the fight, there's not that much they can do for you. So everybody's worried. Everybody's worried. People, particularly in the high-risk category, are worried about this. But instead of just focusing in on getting people the information that we all want to have right now, that we all know we need to have so that we can better take care of each other and of ourselves, journalists want to play games. And they're all doing this thing where they're saying that this is necessary because Trump has botched this response so badly. This is going to turn into a huge, vicious political back and forth, especially because we have an election in the fall, as you know. And we may end up having something more like the New York Times wrote a piece on this today. I've been thinking it for a while. In Britain, for the prime minister, they have a 6-week condensed election schedule. We're going to have a condensed election schedule because you can't do the rallies. You can't do. And in that sense, it's really not a fair. If Russia interfered in the last election, the virus is going to have interfered in this election. There's no question about it. We're not going to have a normal, I'm talking about process-wise, never mind just current events. We're not going to have a normal process. I think that's clear at this point. And there's going to be a lot of calls and a lot of effort to try to make this even more easy, and probably people are going to want to do mail-in ballots, vote online. Anyway, I'm getting a little ahead of myself with that. Trump is trying to get the media to be a little bit more positive, a little bit less nasty, because people are scared right now, and fear leads to bad decisions. I mean, I'll tell you this. A week ago, I was thinking about how if we keep doing this, we're heading for a Great Depression. Now the administration is saying, okay, I don't think we're going to hit a Great Depression. We've got this covered for a while. Do I believe them? Not really, but am I willing to at least now say, okay, they're making the calls. I've made my case. I've made my piece. You know, the liberal journalists out there who view this all through a political lens and can't tone it down even a little bit. I think that they've kind of lost it. They've lost it for a long time when it comes to covering this president. And when it comes to what we see here with the way that they'll ask him questions in public, and then they'll talk about how they're on the front lines of covering this. Oh, there are journalists who are taking risks. All right. I really need to not hear that right now, because we have medical staff taking risks all across the country. You have, pediatricians who have to take COVID-19 precautions for every patient. I'm not even talking about in hospitals, just in practice anywhere, for every patient they see, knowing that they may be exposed to not just the kid, but also the parents coming in. Infection, viral load matters. The degree of the virus that you are exposed to, from what I understand, from an immunological standpoint, matters. And people on the front lines are taking, in that sense, the most risk, the healthcare providers, but also people that are working in grocery stores and the people that are out there and are those in the logistics realm who are keeping all this stuff going. And I really, I thank one of the guys who makes sure that the heat and the electricity is on my building today. I saw him in my lobby here in New York, and I said, I just want to say, man, thank you for coming to work. And he kind of nodded his head a little bit, and he appreciated it, but I could also tell he's worried. He's worried. And every time I go outside my home and go walk around the streets, I'll tell you what that looks like. But I have a very different, so you have to excuse me if I sound a little bit more concerned today than I ever have. One, I think the numbers justify the escalating concern, so there's that, just from a data perspective. But also, I'm seeing it now. I see what's going on, and I've talked to people who are also having firsthand experience with this, and I'm in the worst place. So think of it as though I'm doing a radio show for you now, and it's like my city is being hit with a hurricane, and we're still in the middle of the hurricane. And there's a really serious consideration that this hurricane is going to hit a lot of other cities right after it hits this one. If you put my comments today, I think, into that context. Now, a lot of you are, look, if you're in rural Iowa or you're in, like I said, West Texas, or you're in, Utah, outside of Salt Lake City somewhere, you're outside of Portland, maybe an hour's drive. Yeah, you're probably going to be fine in terms of your exposure to the virus, or I should say, it's unlikely that you'll, come into a lot of people who are have been infected with this virus. But if you live in a city, I mean, New Orleans is, it just breaks my heart. I love New Orleans. It's just it's a magical, and there's just something so special and so cool about it in so many ways. New Orleans is getting hit really badly right now. Miami, another place I love to visit, getting hit really badly. Other cities that I can't even name them off the top of my head. Detroit's in bad shape. It's going to get worse. So it's going to happen elsewhere too. And understand that the government is making decisions based upon what they're seeing happening in these cities right now. I just like to see there's an opportunity here, and I'm going to try to be self-assessing as I go through this. I mean, I've told you that this virus, it's worse than I thought it was bad a month ago. It's worse than I thought it would be. I'm going to try to self-assess as I go through this, because I'm just coming to this, like all of you, as somebody who approaches it with an eye to picking up as much information as possible, learning as much as I can, making the best decisions I can, and pushing for the smartest policy for the most people. There are no perfect answers here. There's no perfect policy. You're going to see, for example, that those who were saying, just send everybody home, shut down the school, send everybody home, there was a spike in infections. I can almost guarantee you the data will prove this. They've seen it elsewhere. They have, from what I understand right now, already shown this to be the case in some parts of northern Italy. Sending the young people home to quarantine with older relatives was an enormous miscalculation, an enormous mistake. That is likely to be one that we revisit. So, people are making good faith errors here and trying to calculate what are sound policies that mitigate risk properly versus what allows us to have an economy so that we still have doctors getting paid and assembly lines making masks in this country, along with keeping food on the shelves and preventing there from being riots. And, there's a lot of moving pieces here. And I just also appreciate so much that all of you are joining me still every day. And we can tell that this audience is still tuning in, still want to know what's going on. I think a lot of what you're seeing, unfortunately, on cable news is just filler at this point. A lot of repetition. They're interviewing the same people. I don't know why everyone wants to interview someone who's already been in a press conference for 2 hours asking questions. I think that's at some point that just becomes repetitive, and I think the information value of that is less than some seem to think it is. But nonetheless, it's troubling for me to see what's going on here, and also the lack of a willingness to put aside the partisan hatchet just for a moment. While this country, at least this city, I can't speak to how bad it will be in the rest of the country. This city and other cities, though, are going to get hit really hard. We're already getting hit really hard here.
Your campaign put out in a critique of President Trump and says if he doesn't do these things, he could cost lives. Do you think there is blood on the president's hands, considering the slow response, or is that too harsh of a criticism?
I think that's a little too harsh. I think what's happening is the failure to, as I watched a prelim to your show where someone said that used the phrase that the president just thinks out loud.
I get really tired of this talking point that the president should listen to the health experts. The health experts are with him and speaking directly to the American people every day. And he just made a massive decision that some people may look back on. I know right now it's okay. The virus is really bad in some places in the country. It's going to get worse in other places. Let's shut down for the entire month of April. Let's hope that the response from the administration to deal with the economy is sufficient. There is the chance that we will look back at this decision to shut down well beyond Easter, to go weeks beyond Easter, and recognize that economically it was disastrous in a way that, we'll see. We'll see. I'm hoping that that's not the case. All along I've been wondering, why is not more of the focus on protecting vulnerable populations and just doing social mitigation, but allowing people to do more work or to do more of their jobs? But I suppose for things like restaurants and other businesses, congregating in numbers is an essential part of the business. So you can't really change that. It's a very complicated problem. And people that are going around dunking on one another because someone's wrong on this one, I can guarantee you this: President Trump, everyone who works in the White House right now, the people that are dealing with this problem day in and day out, if they could wave a wand and save every single life from today forward, they would do it. We all know that. Everyone wants maximum life saved. Everybody wants everyone's mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, wife, husband, son, daughter, you name it, right? We all want all of them to come through this. But we also are operating in the reality of we are in a war with a virus, and right now the virus is taking a heavy toll on us with casualties, a lot. And remember, the casualties is wounded as well as killed. A lot of the people right now who are being intubated and going through this process, they're suffering very badly, even if they come through this on the other side. And that's why when Chuck Todd says something, and this is the start of this little conversation we're having, this segment, do you think there's blood on the president's hands considering the slow response? I mean, Chuck Todd is honestly, he's so indicative of the elite media and someone who, I don't know, it's just all smoke and mirrors. I mean, the guy isn't very bright, doesn't seem ethical in the least in the way that he covers the news, is smarmy, is a little bit of a crybaby, and yet he's offered up by NBC as someone that you should all listen to. I don't know why. You wouldn't want Chuck Todd, you wouldn't want Chuck Todd to have your back in any situation. I mean, this guy just doesn't strike me as somebody of any real character or backbone. Asking that the president has blood on his hands? Really, you're going to hold the president responsible for this? Is the president responsible for what's going on in the rest of the world, too? Because there are every major country right now is either about to or getting crushed by this virus.